There is a moment, heavy, like the turning of a tide, when the search no longer brings comfort to the seeker. What was once chased outside now presses inward, and it demands a question. If it has already been seen, why has it not yet been lived? Not because knowledge is absent, but because something has already seen enough to recognize the distance between what is known and what is embodied. Perception has been seen to distort. Thought constructs, emotion binds. Identity stabilizes around what was never examined. And deeper still, there is a voice within. The one that speaks before action, that warns, directs, and leads the hesitation. Not an error, not an authority. Something more precise. A function seeking coherence. And if this path has been followed even slightly, something has already begun to shift. Subtly, irreversibly. Like a lens turned just enough that it can no longer be returned without noticing. There is a story that has been told for centuries, so often repeated that it is no longer heard. A son who leaves, loses himself, and returns, expecting rejection from his father. But what he finds is not judgment. It is not distance. It is not even forgiveness. He is restored. Completely. Given a ring, a robe, and sandals. What is rarely seen is what this actually means. Because the Father is not external. And the Son did not travel anywhere. The departure was identification. The exile was misalignment. The return is recognition. And this recognition does not arrive from the outside. It never has. There has been a conditioning to look outward, for truth, for direction, for authority, to seek, to gather, to follow. And yet, something begins to become obvious. Nothing external has ever resolved the question. Only delayed it. Like drawing water from different wells while remaining thirsty at the same time and in the same place. Seek the path. Do not seek attainment. Seek for the path within yourself. Do not expect to hear the truth from others, nor to see it or read it in books. Look for the truth in yourself. Not without yourself. There is a reason this resists acceptance, because it removes distance. Do not hope for me. Do not look for me. Do not believe that I am outside yourself. Within your soul, build a lofty tower by which you may ascend. Do not believe in external miracles. Expect miracles only within yourself. This is not metaphor. It is instruction. Do not search for a mystery that can be hidden by men. Seek the mystery within yourself. The path is within. Truth is within. Mystery is within. And if this is so, then what is being approached now is not something new. It is something that has been avoided with precision. Because to see it clearly is to lose the excuse that it is not already known. And from that point forward, something else is required. Not belief, not understanding, alignment, wholeness. Because sovereignty is not control over life. It is not dominance. It is not force. It is the restoration of inner authority. And once that becomes visible, the question changes. No longer what is true, but will this be lived? And that is where the narrow path begins. Let us descend so that we may rise. There is a quiet contradiction running beneath the surface of life. Not dramatic, not obvious, but persistent and omnipresent. Clarity appears, and action does not follow. A pattern is recognized, and then repeated. The direction of alignment becomes visible, and movement drifts elsewhere. Not constantly, but like a hairline crack in glass, easy to ignore at first, until it catches the light from every angle. And so the question begins to take shape, not as curiosity, but as undeniable pressure. If it is seen, why am I not living it? The reflex is to respond into more thought, more refinement, more explanation, more books, more learning, more reading. But that reflex belongs to the same structure being examined, like trying to bite one's own teeth. Because this is not a failure of understanding. It is a failure of integration. If what is seen were fully integrated, there would be no delay. There would be no negotiation, no internal distance between recognition and movement. But there is a distance. And that distance is the fracture. Not between self and world, but within the structure of self. One part recognizes, another continues. One part sees clearly, another remains committed to what came before. This is not confusion. It is divergence. Like two currents moving through the same body, appearing unified on the surface, while pulling each other apart. And as long as that divergence remains, clarity cannot express itself fully. Insight accumulates, but does not transform. Understanding conceptually deepens, but structure remains unchanged. And slowly, truth begins to feel uncertain, not because it is actually unclear, but because it has not been lived. And so the cycle begins again. More seeking, more learning, more accumulation. Because learning resembles movement, even when nothing changes. But if this is not avoided, if attention remains here, something deeper becomes visible. The issue is not that clarity is absent. It is that clarity is not what governs action. Something else does. And until that is seen, sovereignty remains out of reach. Because sovereignty does not begin when something becomes clear. It begins when what is seen and what is done are no longer divided. When you make the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, then you will enter the kingdom. What appears as choice begins to lose its solidity. What once felt like decision reveals itself as repetition. Thought arises and is believed. Emotion follows and directs movement. Behavior unfolds as it has before. Like a river carving the same channel through familiar ground. Choice in this state is not freedom. It is continuity, moving under a different name. And so, the question shifts. Not what should be chosen, but whether anything has truly been chosen at all. Because what feels like control is often momentum, and what feels like will is often reaction. Once this is seen, even briefly, the current loses its certainty. A space appears. Not wide, not permanent. Just enough. Within that space, something new becomes possible. What becomes possible is the potential for your attention to turn inward, towards the voice that has always been there. Not to silence it, and not to obey it, but to understand it. This is not to abandon the voice. In fact, it is to turn towards it and listen without distortion. Because the voice itself is not the source of fear. Fear arises in response to what it reveals. When it criticizes, it is not condemning you. It is pointing to where alignment is incomplete. When it nags, it is not pressuring. It is indicating unrealized potential. When it hesitates, it is not restricting you. It is recognizing where stability has not yet been formed. The voice does not speak in fear. It speaks in pattern recognition. But what it implies, change, responsibility, movement, is met with resistance. Because of a fear of losing continuity, a fear of inadequacy, a fear of responsibility, and a fear of greatness. And so, the signal is misread. What was guidance is experienced as threat. But when this distortion lifts, the voice changes. Not in content, but in clarity. It is no longer a judge, nor an authority. It becomes a point of integration. As patterns lose their grip, a shift occurs. Not force, not energetic movement, a pause. Where reaction once moved instantly, something now waits. And this waiting is not emptiness. It is the fount of possibility. What once felt like choice is seen as conditioned response. And what remains is the beginning of something else. Not yet will, but the ground from which will may emerge. The seed of will, like soil turning before anything begins to grow. From this ground, a distinction becomes clear. Reaction is immediate, familiar, unquestioned. But will is different. Will is choice. Not force, not intensity, not movement, not self-abuse. Will is choice. Choice that is aligned with what has been seen. Reaction moves from the past. Will moves with clarity. Reaction is carried. Will steps forward. And at first, this difference is small, almost imperceptible. But it is absolute. As clarity stabilizes, something opens, not as escape, but as entry. Sovereignty unfolds like a sunrise, not forced or taken, recognized. It becomes clear the risks were always present. The uncertainty was always there. Only now, they are seen. And yet, nothing fundamental has changed. Safety was never lost, only obscured. What emerges is not burden, but participation. A willingness to step into life as it is. Not shielded, not reduced, lived. Sovereignty is not weight. It is freedom, meeting responsibility. Not opposed, identical. In harmonious axiomatic relationship. Your purpose is not to hide or shrink from the weight of choice, but to let your light shine. For you are the light of the world, and that light is meant to be revealed, never concealed. What stands in the way is not the world. It is division within. Not moral failure, not error, fragmentation. Sin is not wrongdoing. Sin is division. We create sin when we act in accordance with the nature of adultery. Adulterare, to divide, to corrupt what should remain whole, to move against oneself. And this is the true conflict. Clarity in one direction, action in another. Truth seen, but not followed. And as long as this remains, sovereignty cannot stabilize, and you have no will. What emerges next is not control. It is integration. Sovereignty does not ask for dominance. It asks for alignment. Like two serpents, each biting the other's tail, circling in balance. Not a single loop, but two, interwoven. Higher clarity and lived expression. The one that sees and the one that acts. Not opposed. Not hierarchical. Learning to move as one. Not perfectly, but progressively. Like two currents that once collided, now beginning to follow the same course. This is not suppression, not transcendence. This is harmony. This is coherence. A marriage of paradox, where knowing no longer stands apart from doing, and action no longer drifts from truth. This movement is not fixed. It ebbs, it returns, it refines. Like a tide learning the shape of its own shore. Each movement of alignment is quiet, not dramatic, not forceful, steady. A flame that does not flare, but remains. Nothing is removed. Nothing is rejected. What was fragmented is brought back into relation. What was past is no longer carried as identity, but integrated as motion. And in that movement, the self no longer fractures against itself. It begins, slowly, to move as a whole. Our inner sovereignty appears quietly, in small moments, speaking truth when silence would be easier, acting when hesitation arises, remaining aligned under pressure, not dramatic but consistent. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. The question no longer changes, it deepens. No longer what is true, but will I live my truth? If this has been followed, something has already shifted. Not as belief, but as recognition. Nothing new is required. Only honesty, and a willingness to remain with what is already visible. Because the path has already begun, and it does not move forward through knowledge, but through alignment.